Good afternoon, dear participants. I am Hendra Gupta. I'm representing Bremen Overseas Research and Development Association. We are having collaboration project with the Asian Institute of Technology, Thailand. Today, welcome to the second webinar on SDG 631, Data Governance and Policies for Wastewater Management. This is a series of webinars. We have our first webinar last Thursday on November 3rd, the same time. And today is the second webinars. And next Thursday, we will have the third webinar on SDG 631, financing for expanding the wastewater treatment and wastewater management. So the current webinar is a collaborative framework to operationalize utility-based wastewater monitoring and management in support of increased investment to attain the SDG. So yeah, and hopefully that we will have a good discussion. Today we have important speakers representing SDG Secretariat from Indonesia, also representing Association of Water Utilities in Indonesia. And also we have speakers from India and Malaysia who will also share their experiences in data management. But before we go to the next session, allow me to revisit the first webinar on wastewater monitoring data and management. So the first webinar was organized on Thursday last week on November 3rd. We have several speakers from representing the first webinar. Mostly speakers are from Thailand because we wanted to show how the country or how Thailand works on the data management. We have speakers from UNHABITAT, Mr. Florian Tevnon, who were presenting about the SDG questionnaire, in particular for SDG 6.3.1. And also we have speakers from the Pollution Control Department, Dr. Chayawi Wang Charunreng. We have speakers from Bangkok Metropolitan Authority, who were presenting about data management of the existing wastewater treatment systems managed by the Bangkok Metropolitan Authority. And also last Thursday, a speaker from GIZ, Mr. Werner Kosman, presented about the cooperation framework, current cooperation framework in Thailand, which supports the government of Thailand in setting up or establishing the database for monitoring wastewater treatment systems. And the next slide, please. Yes, on UNSD questionnaire for SDG 631, I think the United Nations Statistics Division have published this, and UNHABITAT is the custodian for UNSD questionnaire for SDG 631. It was presented by Mr. Florian Tevnon, and hopefully we can you can use later on how to develop the current SDG data management for 631 in your country. Next one, please. We learned also last Thursday about database system for publicly owned treatment works, DSPOT, which was hosted by Pollution Control Department of Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment in Thailand, with support from the GIZ, the German Development Cooperation Agency. And this is a good example of how the efforts of Thailand in terms of gathering data, collecting data on quantity and also quality that is currently existing or currently institutionalized as publicly owned treatment works, which is managed by the governments, can actually support the data management for SDG 631. So without any further ado, may I conclude the revisiting webinar number 1 on wastewater monitoring data and management, that we need to respond to the UNSD questionnaire for SDG 631. So the participating countries in Southeast Asia, we need to initiate the utilization of questionnaires in the country by the SDG offices and relevant ministries, and also to develop partnerships and synergies with water and wastewater utilities universities, development agencies, and other stakeholders or other private agencies that is existing in the country. So there was a request from the Philippines, from the Global Water Partnership, about how to utilize, how to connect with AIT, and also how to connect with UNHABITAT to spread the words on SDG 631, in particular in the Philippines. We hope to get this kind of requests also from other countries. And the second one is that DSPOT, which stands for Database System for Publicly Owned Treatment Works, can inspire you to monitor the quality and also quantity of domestic wastewater treated in publicly owned treatment facilities, which for sure relates to UNSD questionnaires, in particular SDG 631. So this spot is an example of an effort to establish uniform data and also connect local efforts, in particular reporting the quantity and quality of safely treated wastewater. With that, we conclude the revisiting webinar number 1. May I invite our moderator today, Professor Chongrak Paul Praset from Environmental Engineering and Management Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Change of Asian Institute of Technology, to moderate the sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hendra. Good afternoon, everybody. Once again, welcome to this webinar number 2, which deal with about SDG 6, especially 6.3.1. As we all know that SDG number 6 is to ensure sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Now for SDG 6.3.1 is about 6.3 is about wastewater from domestic, industrial, and the aim is to try to halve or 50% reduction of untreated wastewater by the year 2030. And we know that, or we are aware that to ensure the success of the SDG 6.3, that means reduction of the 50% of wastewater untreated. Technology alone is not enough. We have to have other factors also. So that's why we have to emphasize about how to governance the data, how to use the data, and also the policy of wastewater management, so that our aim of reducing 50% of untreated wastewater could be achieved. So we are fortunate that today organizers have invited several experts to come to share with us how to governing the data, how to use the data, the questionnaire, and the policy to achieve our goal. Before that, I'd like to invite Dr. Devi Hanum from Indonesia Habitat to please give the opening remarks. Dr. Devi Hanum, please. Dr. Devi Hanum, would you please make introduction?
Yes, good morning and good afternoon. I'm sorry I have difficulties on the unmuting my microphone, and my apology now that I have to turn off my video because also my network is a bit weak, that I lost sometimes Mr. Hendra on his explanations. So yes, to continue the introductions, good morning and good afternoon to everyone here. My name is Dewi Rimayani Hanum. I'm from UNHABITAT. I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And today for the introductions of the webinar, I am highlighting the importance of the governance and the policies, in particular in our topic today on the wastewater monitoring toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goal. So it is known that the good governance and policies will help for the better wastewater management. But when we are discussing on the topic on wastewater management, good governance and policies, yes, indeed, we result on the good management, but it's a simple equations, but it's not easy for the implementations. Countries in Southeast Asia regions, in fact, have developed a good legislations and also regulations for wastewater management. Yet, they are facing many challenges on achieving transparencies on policies and regulations, implementations, in addition on the clear mechanisms, including standards, monitoring and evaluations, and also the enforcements and also the what we call it penalties and or sanctions. So this is still quite lacking, and there is a gap and a different degree. So, sorry. When the lacking is still remain, then there will be also another challenge: how to relate the data governance on the investment and financing, especially on the local utilities on the water and wastewater. So in principle, the good governance and policies, regulations with the clear mandates on the wastewater and water management utilities, it will really help in wastewater management. So in today's webinar, we will learn from the experience on the speakers will present their thoughts about the principle of the good governance and the policies that help in wastewater management in the regions, and the case studies, experiences in the different countries. And also I see also there are two regions will be representing here, Asia and Africa, about the best practice on the governance and develop policies in managing the wastewater. And this is closely to the COI's approach, and also the challenges on the utilities in water and wastewater sectors that preventing them for the partnerships on the different sectors on managing the water and wastewater resources for the implementing the project and the capacity building and the strategies on adapting the good governance and policies. And afterward, there will be also a speaker about the holistic approach in developing the wastewater strategies and investment in the countries, and how the utilities to connect the data governance on the finance and the investments. Without further ado, we hope that the webinar today is a good platform for all of us to learn from others and each others, and then we will have a good interactive and also proactive environments throughout all the events. Thank you very much for the time for me, and success for the today event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dewi Hanum, for this very nice introduction about how to manage the data, use the data and policy for wastewater management. Now we go to our presenter, resource person. The first speaker is Dr. Vivi Yulaswati from the Ministry of Planning, Government of Indonesia. Dr. Vivi is the head of the SDG Secretariat. So Dr. Vivi, could you please share your screen and then 20 minutes presentation? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Good afternoon, everybody. It's really been a pleasure to be part of this event. Let me share the screen. Okay. I hope you can see my screen. Okay.
Yes, we can.
The implementation of the SDG in Indonesia has been strengthened by this new presidential decree that just has been enacted last month, number 111/2022. This is actually the revisions of the presidential decree that was already enacted in 2017. A couple of points to strengthen the implementation of the SDGs, because as you may know, there are many things need to be accelerated, partly due to the COVID and many other things. We need also to fill in the gap with the involvement of other stakeholders. So through this presidential decree, a couple points to strengthen the implementation of the SDGs, including the formation of the National Coordination Team with the Ministry of Planning as the implementing coordinator, and then strengthening the involvement of the government and non-government. We call it as the non-state actors, including the philanthropy, business, academia, as well as the CSOs. And then we have to update the roadmap that have been a reference for many of us, including the interlinkages as well as financing. And then also we have to revise the National Action Plan for the SDGs, as well as the local action plans for many regions that have been enacted their local action plans. And then we asked the governor as a representative of the central government by involving the region and mayors in more coordinated or in orchestrated for the implementation of the SDGs in the regions. And then MONEF can also be done not only by the government but also by the non-government. And funding, besides the conventional source, we also developing the mechanism as well as other enabling or enabler policies for innovative financing. As you may know, in many other countries also develop the metadata. So for Indonesia, because the stakeholders involving many stakeholders, metadata used as a reference, not only for the national government, but also many other entities, including the businesses and also local government and CSOs. So our metadata includes the concept and definitions, calculation method, data utilization, source and method of data collection, disaggregation, as well as the frequency of data collected. And now we have been revised now for the third time. So the ones that already published is the metadata edition 2, in which we have more national indicators included, as well as mainstream in our national midterm development plan. So, for example, in the previous RPJMN or midterm development plan, only 165. Only 65. Now, around 124 target have been mainstream in the midterm development plan. By doing so, all the indicators done by sectors have been programmed or used in the program, as well as used as a basis for financing. The metadata, different story with the availability of the data. So we still have to improve the availability of the data. Up until now, at the national level, 264 out of 289 indicators have been produced regularly by the Bureau of the National Bureau of Statistics, and then the ministries, agencies, as well as other institutions, and also have been reported. However, at the regional level, only 108 indicators that are available at the provincial level, and only around 26 indicators that are available at the district or city level. So in some themes, we now developing what we call as a small area estimations, statistical processes. It's developed not only by the BPS, but also working with some related entities. And actually, around 113 SDGs indicators have been part of the data priorities in one data policy. So based on other presidential decree, we already developed one Indonesian data in order to elaborate more on who is the main responsible entities, and also who are the users. So by having this, we can avoid the overlapping of the data, and also the data production, as well as reducing the inefficiency in cost, as well as reducing ambiguity, as well as confusing about the data. Yeah. For example, in the previous time, data on the paddy production, for example, produced not only by the Central Bureau of Statistics, but also from the Ministry of Agriculture, as well as other related agencies. So through the Satu Data or one data policies, we decide that the owner and also the producer is only one institutions. For the SDGs, we actually has developed the dashboard since 2019, which displayed mainly on the progress of the SDGs achievements at the national, provincial, and districts, as well as done some gap analysis and provide an indicators trees. We have launched the revision in last year to improve the previous versions of the software and also the front end, and now it's been updated by the metadata edition 2. So more features of the regional data are available, and also there are more deep analytic dashboard and use more feature rich and visualization Tableau apps, because we use Tableau basis. Now we keep in progress to develop on the dashboard for the version of 3, which will include the revisions of the metadata of indicators, SDG indicators, and then also, of course, updating the achievement for some indicators, partly due to after the COVID, and also add some more features, including the 17 sub dashboards for each SDGs goals, and also displays selected strategic indicators, including or providing the trending data and dynamic achievement figures. And one more thing that also quite useful for many local governments is actually the repository best practices. This is actually based on our VNR in 2021, which provided around almost 200 best practices. So after that, we incrementally develop a business process, how to verify the best practices stories which are sorted by goals in relate with the COVID, location, stakeholders, and also the content. So by having more robust repository best practices, we are now preparing, or we use it as a basis to provide an SDGs Action Award, which will be nominated this year through the SDGs Annual Conference by the end of this year. So when we're talking about the indicators 6.3.1, actually what we use now is only or using the proxy indicator. So in our metadata, we use the bracket A, which show the proportion of safely treated industrial wastewater. So include in it is the percentage of industrial wastewater that is safely treated using the ratio of the wastewater produced by the industry that is managed safely based on the level of management, and compare as a denominator to the amount of wastewater generated by industry as a whole. And then also it has the proportion of wastewater generated by industrial activities, which data based on a self-monitoring approach, which is reported online and periodically reported and published by the Ministry of Environment and Forest. Currently, the data that can be generated is wastewater from industrial only, where the data of wastewater from household is still unanswered through the surveys, and also in some study still requires adjustment in terms of the definitions as well as on the availability of the data. I'd like to add one more point about sparring. This is a monitoring system for wastewater quality, which is automatically, continuously, and in a network with the businesses and also activities that used by the Ministry of Environment and Forest to monitor and to record as well as report the activities of measuring the level of parameter and or discharge of wastewater to the water media. So currently there are 51 industries that have been connected by system. 61 industries still in the progress, still for validations and also verifying the portability of the data between system. Actually, it is very few compared to number of industry that obliged to use the sparring or report to the ministry. So of course we are still pursue and work together with many other associations in order to expand the network of the sparring, not only usage but also on the reporting basis. Currently we call it still on the voluntary base. So as a closing, I think I really do hope that this discussion this afternoon will strengthen and strengthen our collaboration, particularly in the development of data provision methodology, especially for wastewater from household, and then strengthening the quality of sectoral statistical data to increase the timeliness and also the validity of the data. And of course, utilizations of non-conventional data, such as optimizing the big data or spatial data as a complementary to data for the SDGs. Thank you very much. And I do hope we can explore more in the discussion session. Thank you very much.
Dr. Vivi, thank you very much for presenting very interesting information about metadata of SDG indicator in Indonesia, and also very impressive percentage, 90% of industrial wastewater safely treated. So yeah, we will learn lesson from your country for other country also. Thank you very much. So our next speaker also from Indonesia, Perpamsi, Association of Water Utility Indonesia. Mr. Subekti, could you please share the screen and presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chongrak. Is it okay, my presentation? Hello.
Yes, yes, very
Okay.
good. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Firstly, Mr. Kabir will present this opportunity. So, but in the same time, Mr. Kabir, as a vice chairman of the Perpamsi, has a meeting with the governor. So that's why he pointed me to have a presentation. So there are three points I will present about the Perpamsi and water supply and wastewater in Indonesia. Perpamsi is Indonesia Water Supply Association, founded in 1972, and the main duties is to address the issue of the member in national and international level. So the second is how to increase the performance of the PDAM. PDAM is a water utility, and to bridge the partnership program offered by local or foreign agency. So this is the vision, to be a professional waterworks association, and the mission is provide the excellent service to the member, encourage the member achieving high performance, the build partnership networking, and facilitate the capacity building, also the implement the good corporate the governance. So this is the board. So now the chairman of the Perpamsi is Lalu Ahmad Zaini. Pak Lalu Ahmad Zaini is a managing director of drinking water in Persero. This is the utility is owned by the two local governments. And the Kabir Pedi, Kabinet's managing director, Perumda Air Tirtanadi. This is the deputy chairman, and Perumda Tirtanadi is also owned by the province level, because there are two water utility owned by the province in Jakarta and in north of Sumatra, and the rest is owned by the local governments. And the Secretary General is Mr. Arif Wisnu, is the Managing Director of PDAM Surabaya, and the Treasury is Pak Agus is Managing Director of Perumda Banyumas, and the Executive Director is Pak Agus Sunara. So this is the Perpamsi. Perpamsi is independent organization, non-governmental, and the member is 440 water utilities. And the role is okay. This is the board. There is a central government board, like the lead of the chairman, and the regional office. We have a regional office each province, and the national secretariat is led by the executive director. 440 water utilities. This is 401 is owned by the local governments, and 16 is owned by private companies, and 23 is public service units. This is the public service unit is running by the department of the local governments. The total connection is 14 million house connection, and the employee is almost 60,000 employees. And this is the organization, and daily activity is running by executive director. There are a partnership bureau, restructuring, and finance bureau. And this is the affiliate of the Perpamsi. We have Water Academy. We have organization for the education. We have certification organization. Also, we have for the pension fund. So this is the Perpamsi associates. And this is the Perpamsi. So the second agenda is the water supply. Based on the baseline 2019, pipeline just only 20% coverage service. 14 house connection, only 20% of the pipeline. So the target is 2024 is from the 20 increasing, becoming the 30% of the pipelines. So this is the number. The revenue is 1.3 billion. 1.3 billion, and the total cost is 1.2 billion, and the profit is 104 millions US dollar. So EBITDA is 390 million US dollar. So this is the technically this coverage service is 28%, but based on the population 20%. On revenue water, this is the one of the challenges in Indonesia is 33.2%. So average tariff is still very low, is 1.38 US dollar per cubic meter. So this is the performance of the figure of the water supply in Indonesia by 2021. And this is the distribution of the number of connections. So we call this is 100, only 27 water utility have the more than 100,000 connection. This is the big water utility. So mostly in Indonesia is very small. For example, this is the below 10,000 connection. There is 107 PDAM, 107 water utility. This is very small, and this is the number of can you imagine, this is from the 107 water utility is 80% is non-full cost recovery. Just this is the challenge in Indonesia, because mostly the water utility is running under very small house connection. So this is the coverage service, and mostly the coverage service is still below 40%. So this is the distribute the number of this is the area, Sumatra area, Java area, Bali, Nusa Tenggara area. This is the area, the Kalimantan Island, Sulawesi. So mostly all the coverage service is still below 40%. And if we are talking non-revenue water in tariff, in the right side, the red line, this is the average tariff, and this is the blue chart. This is the non-revenue water. So below this is the if the region that's the average tariff is higher, this is the non-revenue water is lower. So there is a correlation between the tariff and non-revenue water. And tariff is a good tariff in the region. It means the water utility can manage the maintenance properly. So this is non-revenue water and revenue. So this is this area. This is best opportunity to reduce NRW, non-revenue water. So this is I mentioned before that 33.2%. This is national average. This is non-revenue water, and this is a very big challenge in Indonesia. And this is losses connection per day. This is losses and non-revenue water. So you can see this is liter connection per day. This is the losses. We see that the like the Makassar. This is the Makassar. This is the high losses liter connection per day. Also, this is the area. This is the Bandung area. This is also very high, the losses liter connection per day. So this is international cooperation that's partner as an association from Japan, Korea, Malaysia, USA, Bangkok, Thailand, Pakistan, also the Australia. So this is, we have partners also from the NGO and training institution, Waterlink, Penang Service Academy, Malaysia, also the International Water Center from the Australia. And this is the PERPAMSI program. One of the mission of the PERPAMSI is how to improve the performance of water utility. So we have the Solidarity Partnership Program. We have this year we have 22 couple. This is a good water utility as a mentor, and this is the poor water utility as a mentee. So we have partners, and mentor and mentee has a program in 1 year, and I think this is a good programs. Now there are 22 couple, and this is one of the program that's also very good results. So we have also the on-the-job training. We have awarding scholarships. Yeah, we have a water academy, and if there is a water utility that's a poor performance, we also have awarding scholarship for the people from the poor water utility. So the challenges, the end opportunity. So this is the national targets. That's the 2024 must be at the 10 million connection. It means from 20% to 30% in increasing 12% per year. This is very challenging. So also this in Java Island especially, there's very limited water resources, and also the climate change. Climate change is now is hydrometeorology disaster is increasing, and also this is we have required development and rehabilitation to ensure this is the challenge. 63.1% of the PDM is operated by non-full cost recovery. This is a very big problem, because mostly the tariffs must be issued by the local government, and this is very difficult to have to increasing tariff, because this is there is a political impact. So this is the the challenges in water utility. So third is wastewater in Indonesia. This is the baseline and the national target. So safely managed is 7.6%, and the national target is 15%. So we have this is Forkalim. Forkalim is wastewater association and established by Propamsi actually, and the member is institution and individuals. And wastewater operator in Indonesia is the first is PIDAM. This is combined with the drinking water utility and water wastewater is one company. The second is local government's wastewater company. In Indonesia, there are two local government wastewater company in Jakarta and Banjarmasin, and PLUD, we call PLUDS. This is the special organization. Maybe 50% is acting as a company. And there are two operators as a PLUD in Bekasi and Makassar. So the rest is a special organization operates by the local government department. So this is UPTD and Dinas. So this is the one of the challenge also in wastewater operator in Indonesia. And the Forkalim program is the same with the Propamsi. This is twinning program. We have 10 couple of the twinning programs. And so also we are facing the value added tax. So drinking water is now already free value added tax, but the wastewater still have a value added tax. So the third is the capacity building. So this is the situation. So who's the actor? This is the on-site system. The containment is the actor is private developer and government. So and discharging, emptying and transport this is the private local government and also the local government owned company. So the treatment mostly the treatment is a local government and local government owned companies, because on site value chains there is added value just only in emptying and transport or of discharging. If treatment is this is must be government must be handled in this treatment and disposal. And this is for the offsite. Offsite is still very limited in Indonesia. Offsite still 13 city has the offsite facility, and for the onsite we 281 regencies have the sludge treatment, and the rest is still don't have the sludge treatment. This is the challenge of cities and regencies in Indonesia. And for the sewage is the growing market. So this is the 13 city have the sewage system, and now there are ongoing projects. There are Jambi City, Palembang City, Batam, Makassar, Pekanbaru, and now the Metropolitan Sanitation Management Investment Project. So this is ongoing now. And also the Jakarta is divided by 14 zones, and zone 1 is now ongoing, but Jakarta is a very huge investment, so that's why this is not easy to implement the sewage in Jakarta. But this is the market is growing for the sewage. This is the picture from the Ministry of Public Works, the Pekanbaru, Jambi, Palembang, also the this is the ongoing projects. So so the challenge in sewage is okay. This is the sewage is this is the characteristic: high investment, take a long time to construct, so very complex, take a long time to utilize, financially not feasible, but economically feasible, needs public service obligation to operate. So this is the challenges, the regulation, yes, actually water and wastewater law. Indonesia needs water and wastewater law. So only water and wastewater infrastructures now doesn't have law. All the infrastructures have law. So that's why this is very hard to implement water and wastewater. So the second is institutional. This is, we are talking the governance. So operator, regulator. So mostly only small part in Indonesia, this regulator and operator is the separate entity. So regulator is, so this is the challenge for the institutional. So must be defined, the policymaker, regulator, and operator. This is must be defined by institution. But in Indonesia now, still very limited. Operator and regulator is separate institution. And of course, the financing mostly the local government fiscal capacity is low, and stakeholder mindset. This is a big issue in Indonesia. That's the sanitation is not sexy, as still not sexy issues in Indonesia. So also the culture. This is the challenges. So on site, the challenges is if we are talking to improve the safely managed from 70.6% until 15%, it means that we have to add around 4 million houses. This is not easy to reach this target, but this is the challenge. So not only financial, but only technical, not only regulation, but also the mindset of the stakeholder. So this is I think this is the last the presentation I will show. That's the research. This is the customer pet of this is the Jakarta case. This is the research established by the Mark Plus by the IWAS Plus program. That's in Jakarta, just only the contemporary. This is only 40%. This is aware about the sanitation. Only 40%, 14%. This is very small in Jakarta city. So 45%, this is, we call the light bag. This is sanitation is, this is government jobs. This is this is this is the government jobs, and the practical is 41%. This is I don't care about the sanitation. I just basic need first. This is sanitation research in Jakarta. Also, this is if we are talking about the customer pet, awareness of the dislodging is higher, but until to action, this is becoming very low. If we are talking about septic tank, also awareness is high, but until action is this is I think this is better compared to the dislodging. If storage, awareness is very low. Yes, we know that the coverage of storage is very limited, so that's why awareness is very low. And also for the action to connect the storage is very low action. This is the result of the sanitation in Jakarta case. This is the last presentation, and thank you. If you have any presentation, please. Thank you, Professor.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Subeki, for this very interesting presentation about comprehensive program, the target, and so on, and the challenges ahead. So we will have a lot of discussion later on. Now, I propose we had take a break for 5 minutes to allow the audience to write down in chat box whatever question or clarification you may have, so that the speaker can clarify or answer your question at the end of session. 5 minutes break. Thank you. Or okay, maybe now we can take some question. One question, perhaps Mr. Florian Tevanon. Mr. Florian, are you with us here? Mr. Florian Tevanon. Yes, Florian, you have a very interesting remark about how to include the Indonesian industrial wastewater treatment for the next SDG 6.3.1 reporting. This is related to the presentation by Dr. Vivi. Dr. Vivi, or Mr. Florian, you want to clarify further, or you want Dr. Vivi to maybe respond now? Okay, Dr. Vivi, could you please maybe answer Mr. Florian Tevanon remarks? Dr. Vivi.
Which one, the questions?
Mr. Tevanon, could you help clarify?
Yeah, people just opened my mic. Thank you very much. I was not able to speak. No, thank you very much. I was really pleased to see so much data and so much. It's also clear that the topic was on governance, but it's clear that we need data for.
You're muted.
Yes, someone is muting me. So no, it was great to see that we need data for governance, right? It's really important, and to see that it's at the cities, the district level, national level. It's really good data set and fantastic data monitoring. So I was pleased to see that there is a wastewater monitoring program, sparring. I try, but again, this is not in English, but I will ask. My colleague is from Indonesia, so so she might help me. But no, for the first presentation, that was also so great to see the introduction with the decree, the governance and the data and the statistical approach, because it's true that you can't get data from everywhere. So sometimes you have to find a statistical approach on the dashboard. So my reflection was on the 90% of industrial wastewater treated. First, because usually it's more difficult to find industrial wastewater data than household wastewater data. Usually people use the water supply to its monitor, because people pay for that. But on industrial, I was just making the reflection because I have contacted the Indonesian authority, but I never got any response. So if the reporting is not done by answering to me or by responding to the UNSD questionnaire, we don't have data from Indonesia yet, but that would be great if we could connect. We'll link my UNSD colleagues. They will tell me we send the UNSD UNEP questionnaire to this and this person in Indonesia, so that they could connect with the people owning the data and filling this questionnaire, so that there will be some data from the next reporting. Thank you very much. That was not really a question, but a long comment. Thank you very much. Over.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for the comment and also the observation. Yeah, one of the challenges on the source of the data in Indonesia in many cases are in bahasa, in Indonesian language. So particularly for global usage, is hard to digest about what's in it and also how to access. Maybe if you could work with the UNEP Jakarta, we can actually sit together and see which one that we could provide in English. Actually, for dashboard SDGs, now we start to produce in 2 languages. But when you're talking about other system, particularly belong to the sectors, the ministries, not many that are available in English. But I will convey and pursue that as many as possible. Those systems are available also in other languages, so it can accessible by global usage. Thank you, Mr. Tevanan.
Thank you, Dr. Vivi. Maybe I have one question to ask Mr. Subekti. Mr. Subekti, yes, the PROPAMSI program is quite interesting, including also capacity building. But one of your slides show that the plan for the safety management sanitation to be increased from what 7% to 15% in the year 2024. Is that right? So although it is 100% increase, but percentage seem to be small. You think that is sufficient for Indonesia to have a safely managed wastewater treatment or sanitation, or how to increase further to be 50% as in the SDG 6? Thank you. Mr. Subekti, please.
Yeah. Yeah, if we are talking about the domestic wastewater, this is not easy to achieve that because not only technical, or for example, based on our experience in Jakarta, we have the government's what's the meaning of programs, what government program to subsidize to install the septic tank. So in Jakarta there is 105,000 house connection doesn't have the septic tank. So that's why the government has a program to subsidize the community to install the septic tank. But the result is even free. This is not easy to install the septic tank. So this is situation of the sanitation. So how to increase? The first is must be for my view is must be the regulation. It must be very tight regulation. So for example, the previous is Indonesia is very difficult to what's meaning of to manage the smoker, but the regulation is the very tight regulation, and now very easy. There is no building in Jakarta which the area for smoke. For the smoker, it must be outside of the building. This is must be the regulation must be very strong. This is I think this is my opinion, Professor.
Okay, thank you. So I propose we continue our presentation. Next speaker will be by Mr. Ram Paul, who is a senior consultant of Ethina Informatics, which is a consulting company in Chennai, in India. Mr. Paul, are you ready? Please share your screen and also make presentation, 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chandra. I hope I'm audible. Let me just share my screen. So good afternoon, everyone, and hello from others who are joining from other parts of the world. So I'll be talking about data governance, primarily about two aspects: what data to be collected and how do we collect it, and the challenges around surrounding that particular these two questions and how we can address some of these challenges. We'll be talking more from our experiences across implementing the monitoring and learning for citywide inclusive sanitation across 8 towns in Asia and Africa. But before that, I would like to talk briefly about the organization that I represent and the kind of work that we have been doing. So I'm working as a principal consultant with Athena Infonomics. For those who do not know about Athena Infonomics, so we are a data-driven global consultancy, primarily leveraging social science research and data analytics to support policy makers into driving context-specific solutions. And we are headquartered in Chennai in India, but we have offices in Washington, DC, and program hubs in Asia, in countries of Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as in Asia. Primarily working in South Asia at the moment, but then I think the learnings that we will be sharing is applicable to almost all the lower income countries, local governments as well. And the kind of work that we do, it spreads across a broad spectrum of areas, water and sanitation being one of the most primary areas that we have been working on. But in addition to water and sanitation, we also work in housing and urban development, livelihoods, education, and healthcare. In water and sanitation specifically, we are working on citywide inclusive sanitation, but then apart from that, we have been working on integrated waste, water resource management, solid waste management, a lot of gender issues that we have been working on, equity in sanitation services, climate resilient planning. So these are some of the areas that we have been working on. For today's particular discussion, we'll be focusing on citywide inclusive sanitation and the monitoring and data governance linked to that particular thematic area. Some of the tools that we have been working on, and these tools are available on the public domain, open access, and it can help you through from starting from planning interventions. So the FSM toolbox, which we co-developed with AIT as well. So the FSM toolbox helps in sanitation situation assessment, helps you assess what the current baseline scenario is, and also then to go on to infrastructure planning in your particular city or in a particular region. We also have the citywide inclusive sanitation monitoring framework, which is the image from the dashboard on the right side that you can see, and I'll talk more about this. I'll share the link of this particular platform on the chat box as well. So that you can go to the website and look around in the website. I'll give a quick demo of how the website looks like. And then, so that basically helps you monitor and assess how the cities are performing in terms of delivering sanitation. Then we have a tool, which is a service assessment and planning, which basically helps water utilities understand what are the different options that they have in terms of delivering sanitation. When I talk about options, it can be an infrastructure option, it can be a regulatory option, like introducing regulations, introducing taxes. Evaluating all those options and then assess how you can plan what is the most efficient and the most effective option for the utility in terms of delivering services, as well as in terms of financial viability, as well as in terms of equitable sanitation. And I'll talk more about that equitable sanitation in much more detail over the next few slides. And then we have the risk assessment tool, which basically helps you understand what is the geospatially looking at the city, trying to understand which areas in my city are the most vulnerable to climate risk impacts, or most vulnerable, and where the lower income communities and slum areas are located, and which population is most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So these are few tools that we have been working on. And in today's discussion, I'll talk specifically about the citywide inclusive sanitation's measurement framework. The learnings that I'll be sharing is from 8 cities globally, couple of cities in Asia, so out of which we have a city which is located in Bangladesh, It's a fairly big city in Bangladesh, and then we have a mix of medium cities, small cities, as well as highly densely populated and metropolitan cities as well, coming from India. And then we have 3 large cities coming in from Africa. So one is Dakar in Senegal. We have learnings from Kampala in Uganda and Lusaka in Zambia. So these are the few 8 cities, just to give you a context that where these learnings come from and what kind of applicability these learnings have. And before I get into the measurement framework, I'll talk briefly about the citywide inclusive sanitation framework. So what we have seen is traditionally, whenever governments, and also I've been looking at the presentations by Dr. Vivi and and my previous presentation as well by Mr. Subekti. So I think a lot of our focus has been traditionally on infrastructure access. Or how we are providing services, what is the treatment capacity available, and what is the number of connections provided, or the non-revenue water, what is the percentage of that, or in terms of seaward connection, how many households have seaward connection. So a lot of infrastructural focus that we have seen. And over the years, what we have also observed, be it on SDGs, be it on achieving MDGs earlier, so there's been a lot of disproportionation, or there is a lot of disparity in how the services are being delivered. Like, for example, it will be really interesting to also understand in Mr. Subekti's presentation, when it was mentioned about that 7.5% is currently having access to safe sanitation services. Out of that, how much is what is the how is it disaggregated across the poor and across the income sources, or how much poor population have access to safe sanitation as compared to the rich and the highly income community. So I think those kind of, it has been very disproportionate and in terms of delivering services, and there is a lot of disparity that we have seen, which is why the framework of the citywide inclusive sanitation comes into picture, trying to bring a very strong focus on driving inclusive services, and which is equitable as well. So we have 3 outcomes that we want to achieve. We want to understand that whether the services that is being delivered is equitable or not, so that the services reflect fairness in distribution, so that I am not providing services only to the core part of my city where highly income communities are located, but then also towards the pockets at the urban area, or the towards the peri-urban areas as well, where it is not connected to the core sewer system. So there's a lot of equitable aspect, equity aspect that needs to be focused on. And then accordingly, we can also prioritize the service quality. We can look at pricing and the tariff structures, which is equitable for the lower income households as well as for the higher income, and look at cross subsidies. So that is all on the equity aspect. We definitely have the safety at the core of it, looking at whether the services are safely delivered to the customers or not, meeting the standards, meeting the norms, whether I have a treatment plant in my capacity. So all of the infrastructural component and the norms, regulations related aspects come under that. And then we also look at sanitation workers' safety, because one of the key components is also to focus on the dignity and livelihood standards of sanitation workers. So looking at their safety as well, whether they are using personal protective equipments while delivering services, do they have the right kind of equipment, are they providing manual emptying, or are they providing mechanical emptying? So looking at those aspects as well, it is very important for us in order to drive inclusive services. And then obviously we want to look at how sustainable the services are. So whether the services are reliable without depending on external sources, like as much as less amount of dependence on donor-driven grants, or focusing on understanding how much operational expenditure is happening, and whether the utility or the local government is able to recover that amount or not. And also looking at the both the financial as well as the human resource sustainability point of view as well. So the CWISE framework is structured in such a way that we need to achieve these outcomes of equity, safety, and sustainability, and how we feel that it is very important to have these functions in place. So the functions are nothing but enabling environment in place, which can help us achieve these outcomes. And also going back to the earlier presentation where Mr. Subekti was focusing on those challenges on institutional, on the regulatory aspects. And I think it is very important to also understand how to track and whether we have mechanisms which can help us understand what kind of regulations are in place and looking at and tracking those things, or what kind of policies are being implemented, and whether and which can also stimulate discussions on how we can progress from the current gaps that is there. So we are focusing on three aspects. One is responsibility, and responsibility needs to be very clearly outlined in terms of who is delivering services, and who is also setting those, whether at the regional level or at the federal level, whether there are regulations in place, or who is setting those regulations, and looking at that aspect is very important. Similarly, at the local level, also trying to understand whether the local governments are adhering or are enforcing those standards or regulations on the ground or not. And whether the regulations or the policies and the acts are very inclusive in nature, whether they have a specific focus towards providing services to the urban poor or to the marginalized groups. So that is on the responsibility part. What we also focus on, the second thing, is accountability. We strongly believe that it is very important that for us to hold, or there needs to be a mechanism which can hold the local governments or whichever organization or institution is responsible for delivery of those services, hold them accountable for delivering those services. There is a clear performance indicators, and the performance indicators should also there should be targets which is progressive in nature. And the targets should, what I mean by progressive targets is like going back to one of the examples, like we cannot aim for 100% at once if the baseline scenario is very weak. So it needs to be incremental in a way. And every year or every quarter, there needs to be checking, or every half yearly, depending on the utilities and the authorities mandate, there needs to be a clear accountability framework which can help assess that how much the utility is progressing towards meeting those targets or not. And finally, we are looking at resource planning and management, where we are looking at whether the resources that is being allocated to the poor or to the cities, whether they are very much demand driven or not, whether it accurately captures whatever, or it is sufficient to meet the demands at the local level. So there needs to be a clear financing framework that this local governments needs to follow in order to prepare their budget, and then accordingly seek for support from the regional and the federal ministries. And then also looking at whether there is enough resources at the human resources level as well, looking at whether there is enough personal and human resources available at the local level to deliver on those responsibility outline mandates that have been highlighted in the responsibility section. So this is the broad framework, and the indicators that I'll be talking about, looking at what data to be collected, is based across these particular 6 components. I will not discuss more in detail about the indicators. I'll share a link to those indicators, but just to give you a sense of the number of indicators that we talk about. And I think it is very important to talk about this numbers, particularly the moment there is a lot of things that the city governments are doing, often which is like poorly staffed or they do not have the resources. So it's very important to select indicators which is not only going to help the utilities plan and deliver their own services, but then also look at the tracking their services as well. So if we are looking at the outcomes, it is only close to around 45 to 50 indicators that we are looking at, which is quantitative in nature. Now, these are very much quantitative indicators. Now, while looking at the functions, so the functions are qualitative reforms, because we are looking at the enabling environment. We are talking about qualitative these are mostly like interview guides, which can help you understand whether a particular policy exists or not in a simple yes or no. But then in addition to that, there needs to be accompanying qualitative narratives to those indicators, which can help you then understand or have a discussion amongst the relevant stakeholders to understand where the challenges are and how we can address those challenges with respect to covering those gaps. So And I'll share the website. And so this is the website. You can go to www.cycities.com. And this particular website, on the website, just let me quickly show the website. So this is the website. And over here, you can easily, so over here, you can easily look at the CV's dashboard, and from the CV's dashboard, you can easily download the full list of indicators. So I'll not be spending more time on the indicators, but then you'll get a sense of the indicators from here. Which is also, and there is a dashboard. So the dashboard basically helps you look at the quantitative data and also evaluate how your city is progressing on a yearly basis. So there is trend analysis possible, and you can also compare it to the other cities and look at how the cities are performing across set of indicators. So the tool is readily available. I think it will be really helpful to also 20 minutes is very short time to go through all of these, but then please write to us if you can, and we can discuss more about how to help the city, your city as well, to be reflected on this dashboard, and how you can compare the cities across these parameters. So just to give you a sense of what extent of the indicators have been already incorporated in the Government of India mechanisms. So if you look at it, there's a lot of coverage on the safety related indicators, which is close to 70%. Again, on sustainability, there's a majority of the indicators are being covered. But then there's a very limited focus on the equitable sanitation aspect, which is where, so this kind of an exercise basically helps us which indicators to prioritize, and where there can be more attention, and in terms of conversations with the local governments as well, and the national and regional governments, and what indicators to be prioritized. Similarly, on the outcomes, you will see that there's a lot of 70% and 66% coverage. But then in terms of the enabling environment, there's a very lower understanding of how the cities and the governments are performing across, or there are, whether there are the enabling environment is robust enough or not. So I think there's a lot of focus that needs to go into looking at how the regulations are structured, or how the resource planning and management is being done. And similar exercise can also be done by looking at evaluating the SDG 6.3 indicators, or any other country monitoring mechanism that exists. So I'll share a couple of few learnings from the field that we have seen, and particularly focusing on the data challenges. So 4 learnings that we have seen, which is mostly in terms of data availability, data sharing, data use, and data sustainability. I'll not cover one aspect, which is data quality, and there needs to be a lot of other factors which needs to be in place to strengthen the data quality, which I'll talk in the next slide. But in terms of data availability, let's look at the sanitation value chain. From the 8 cities that we have collected data, so there is census, there is data which is coming in from the user interface part and the containment systems part, which is either coming from the countrywide census, or any kind of program linked, which is program driven by the national governments. And that particular program has a set of objectives that it needs to meet. Like, for example, in India, we have the Clean India Mission. In Bangladesh, there's the Urban Governance Improvement Infrastructure Program. So there's a lot of program linked object specific object data that is being collected at the user interface level, which is government supported. So you see that a lot of government focus is there on looking at access, toilet access. Now, or there is also the donor funded interventions, like doing a household baseline while developing a city sanitation plan, or developing a master plan, or any kind of public toilets and community toilet surveys. And then across the value chain, so there is looking at emptying services, there are digital tracking applications which is linked to dashboard, which helps you assess the how the services are being delivered, or how the septic tanks are being emptied, and the treatment of it.
2 minutes left. Mr. Paul, 2 minutes left.
Yes,
so
yes.
Wrap up this.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Which is very much donor funded. And then again, looking at the treatment unit, again, it is very much donor funded. So the point what I'm trying to drive here is that there is reasonable coverage of government owned data, but then the data sets for emptying and conveyance and beyond the user interface, it is very much driven by external donor funded, which also links to the sustainability, that how sustainable it is in terms of data collection after the donor funds exits. And there is very limited focus on pro-poor and gender intentional data. Looking at data sharing, often we have seen that like a lot of utilities or a lot of agencies in the same city are collecting data, but then there's limited data sharing that is happening, which leads to poor decision-making systems or inefficient decision-making. And then again, in terms of data use, there is very limited support that is provided to city scale data systems to be much more robust, and limited use of data for planning improvements. So in terms of data flows that we have seen, it is very unidirectional. From the local government develops generates the data, which is then fed into the national government. And there is very limited accountability that provides feedback to the local government. Then again, at the local level, the ULB budgeting is there. Usually local governments collect data related to finances, or if there is any kind of donor required data that needs to be collected. So the census is the only data set which is consistently collecting 100% ULB data across different services. So one thing that is very important to strengthen the data flows is that ULB should not be a data producer. They should also be a data consumer, meaning that ULB should also use the data for their own planning improvement, so that it is much more, so that they can also use it and it becomes much more sustainable in the long run. This is my last slide. So I'll not, so these are basically the kind of data systems that we have seen across the cities. But one thing in what way which we are seeing is the one thing which is helping the cities strengthen their local data systems is the IMIS system, which is the Integrated Municipal Information System, which is being implemented in one city in Bangladesh. And there is, at the national level, they are coming up with a national sanitation dashboard, which has been launched for 62 towns. And right now the dashboard is being revised and revamped in terms of additional indicators and developing local data generation systems. Means what kind of systems can be put in place at the local level to help generate the data. And in addition to that, there's a lot of capacity building and hand-holding support that is required. Which is then linked to IMIS, which can not only help the cities collect data and use it for their own planning services, but then also help the national governments into funding structure, into deciding what kind of fund support is required. And we are providing the technical advisory support to that also in collaboration with AIT at the national level. And the last thing, one thing which is what we have done is using the citywide inclusive sanitation, the service assessment and planning tool. When Lusaka in Zambia, they were collecting a lot of data for their citywide sanitation mapping study. We supported in looking at the data collection instruments so that they can look at a much more holistic set of data that is required and analyze that data to understand what kind of systems would be most helpful for the city. And then we help them develop scenarios, and the scenarios basically help them to structure which is the most appropriate business model for that particular city. In terms of it can be seaward expansion, or in terms of it can be looking at the on-site sanitation as well. And what we have achieved out of that process was there has been a very standard tariff setting which is equitable and financially viable, and looking at how the city can also implement subsidy for emptying services, which is currently applied and currently being implemented in the city. So please write to us in case that we can have bilateral conversations as well with respect to how we can support your city as well. I'll stop here. Hope I have not exceeded. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you, Mr. Rampal, for this very interesting information about citywide inclusive data and framework and so on. We will have some question discussion later on. Next presentation is from Mr. Dorai Narayanan from INDA Water Consortium, Malaysia. Mr. Dorai, if you're ready, please share your screen and start presentation, please. Mr. Dorai Narayanan, please share the screen and presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to present from my side, if it is okay. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm I've been working in Malaysia in the sanitation and sewerage area for many years, from the time of local government in the 80s, right down to when it was a national utility. So I'm going to speak about my experience during that period. So this is briefly a snapshot of Malaysia for those of you who don't know. It's a very urbanized place. More than 75% of the population is urbanized. Reasonably affluent, with about 13,000 USD GDP per person estimated for 2022. And in terms of water supply and sanitation, the coverage is pretty good too. There's water supply in most of the urban areas with 24/7 piped water, and quite a big chunk of the rural areas too are receiving piped water for in their households for 24/7. And sanitation, which is our primary thing we are going to talk about, we have more than 70% of the population is connected to a sewer system with a pipe and an STP, and about 20% to septic tanks, and other 10% are using a kind of inferior kind of septic tanks, maybe something like pits or things like that, right? So this is why we were 50 years ago, a lot of problems of open defecation, direct discharges, and network infrastructure which was collapsing, and very poor management, and also a lot of waterborne diseases. And today we have a very good infrastructure, governance, and an institutional framework as well. So much so that it's considered a model for the developing world for sanitation. So I want to talk about a few phases of the Malaysian journey. So before 1957 was when we got our independence from the colonial British. And from then to the 70s and 80s, the local authorities focused on providing basic sanitation, ensuring everyone had a toilet and some kind of a containment. That was their focus. And then from the 70s to 80s, 70s and after the 70s and 80s, it was found that was insufficient. And then a drastic change in governance took place. And then they started looking at how can we improve the infrastructure that is already there, and how can we manage it well? How can we manage the sludge that is accumulating in these containments? That was the focus from 1994 onwards. And until 2008, then they started looking at water and wastewater in a more integrated way, and water resources. And now it is looking more in terms of appropriate strategy. So what is most appropriate? What is most affordable, considering the local conditions of each individual area, resource recovery, and a sustainable business model where it can be a full cost recovery eventually. So these are the phases. The first phase where the basic sanitation was a focus. The second, where it was more of a getting infrastructure working. And third, where it is looking more for appropriate strategies. So this was the first phase where the local authorities managed sewerage and sanitation. And the focus was, let's provide toilets for everyone. Let's eliminate ineffective systems like direct discharges or buckets and things like that. But they neglected that the septic tank numbers were increasing, and the quality of the construction and design was poor, and the sludge was overflowing and polluting the rivers and coastal areas. And there was no dislodging that was being done, and even it was done, the sludge was not being treated. So the areas where the focus was being done, that's where the measurement took place. And the areas which were neglected, the data of those was neglected. So things like this was the norm. How many treatment plants are there? You can see it increasing, so they think they're doing quite well. By 2010, you have about 10,000 sewage treatment plants throughout the country, so it's pretty good. But whether they were working, that's another story. And how many population was connected to these treatment plants? Again, showing an increasing trend, good. But if the plants are not working, it doesn't mean much, right? So the kind of measurements that was being done in those days was different. Then this is the governance post 1994. There were two regulators who came in. One was the SPAN, which is the National Water Commission. They regulate services provided, sanitation and sewerage services. And they also regulate the technical details, the designs, the way it's constructed and so on, and also economic in terms of tariffs charged and in terms of customer service, right? And the Ministry of Environment looked at the effluents that were coming out of these facilities to ensure that they comply to the standards. And this Inda water that is shown here, if I can get a pen. Yeah, sorry. So this is the national utility that was awarded a national concession to manage all the sewage treatment plants in the country and the septic tank services as well. And there were others as well. And there were permit holders who did the dislodging and the construction. Here the focus, again, coverage. How much was covered? How much complied? Effluent compliance was being measured now. Dislodging of on-site systems was being measured. How many of the septic tanks were being dislodged? The sludge that was collected, how much was being treated? That was being measured. And the service level, how quickly do you respond to customer complaints or customer requests? So this became the focus, and the measurement of data, the data that was used was focusing on these kind of things. And we created things like this to show the situation. 1960, I think many of you are familiar with these. These are called shit flow diagrams. So on the left-hand side, you see the type of sanitation here: off-site sanitation, on-site, and open defecation. And here is the value chain of containment, collection, transport, treatment, reuse, and then disposal, right? So if it's a green all the way, that's pretty good. So you got 25% contained, certain percentage transported, and certain percentage treated. And here, not contained, not collected, and discharged to the environment. So the nearer this red arrow leaves to the bottom means it's closer to the community, right? So if it's far away, it's somewhere near the river, very far away. So this was the situation in the 60s and gives a snapshot. And this, of course, the data behind it. It's a pictorial representation of the data that shows what's the situation in the 60s in Malaysia. And then by the 80s, you see there's a vast improvement here. The green parts have increased quite a lot. Red parts have become smaller. And also on the right-hand side, you see what is the percentage of safely managed sanitation. So from the 60s, where it was only 31%, went to 50% in the 80s. And then further improvement today, until today, we have about 87%, which is being safely managed, and only 13% are some leakages that are happening here. Some parts where the containment is not proper, and so on. So this kind of graph is a representation of the data that gives you an idea of where should you focus, where is your real problem that is happening, and where should your investment go. So this is the bottom line, that the data that is collected must be organized in such a way that it becomes actionable, that we are able to take some actions to correct what is not right, right? So this is how this is appropriate for today's situation. And for future, this is where we want to head. Maybe we cannot achieve 100%, but we go for 95%, right? So this may be a target that is set, and we know to go from here to here, where should we address the situation and where the investments should go. Here is a concept called a line of sight, which some of you may be familiar. So when your objectives are not aligned or not clear and visible, then there are a lot of agencies which are taking a lot of actions which are not aligned, and therefore you don't really achieve the objectives that you have set, right? But when you start aligning them and set a clear strategic objective, then the actions on the ground, which are based on a feedback mechanism of data that is being collected and sent back to the people who are initiating the interventions, you find the efforts are aligned and coordinated and far more effective. So this is the principle of a line of sight, which we have adopted. And now in our planning, we have got this same concept of the data to be collected, analyzed, and organized into information, which is useful. And the decisions are made on that information, and actions are taken on that. So the interventions then result in something where it is you can see the impacts on the ground. And this is a loop that goes back, right? This is something that is right now we are working on. We are using, you remember what I mentioned about, we are going towards more of a appropriate sanitation. So here is a multi-criteria risk ranking. So we have gone on a river basin basis, or the cities are actually ranked on the basis of the river basins that they are located in. And we have the river basins and various data are here regarding the cities and how the sewerage or sanitation impacts on various receptors. So the receptors are grouped into 3 types of receptors. One is, of course, the community, how this impacts the community. And here you would have a lot of the C-wise principles here, citywide inclusive sanitation principles. The water resources, how are they impacting the water resources, not only for drinking water, but for recreation, for economic purposes, and so on. And environmental sustainability. And this is where we look at energy usage, carbon footprint, disaster resilience, and things like that. So this is going to look at the impacts of sewerage from these 3 different angles. And it also looks at the individual catchments vulnerability, again, in terms of these 3. And that results in a tool like this, which then prioritizes the catchment in terms of high, medium, or low. That's shown in the red, yellow, and green. And again, it projects. This is current 2030 and 2040, right? So it's about 10 years and 10 years periods. It could be longer. And you can see how some of them are maybe improving, some of them are getting worse, and so on. And all our interventions can be based on the priority that is given here. So this, the red catchments or the red cities, which are the high risk, is where the biggest interventions might take place. Those here might be a little less priority, and those here might be low priority, right? And here again, in a map form, now we have put, this is the whole of part of the West Malaysia. We have put the colors on each of these areas, which are based on the river basins. And you can see that where the red color is where the high priority are, and the green is the low, and so on. And when you take one of these catchments here, this is how it looks like. And this map can be done on the basis of different types of sanitation effluents or emissions and how they impact the local environment. And you can see where the dark red is where your focus should be. And your interventions will then be focused on this area. What type of interventions? Here you are. So we are now looking at, this is a kind of a graph that shows how is the situation, the profile of the regionalized systems in this particular high risk zones and in the low risk zones, and some recommended ranges where should be targeted. So regionalization in the high risk should be going for 20 to 50% in the medium term, that's 2030, and in the long term going to 2040. So this is how we are working on a kind of a prioritization based on local conditions, considering the river basins and IRBM, that's integrated river basin management as well. Going back to the SDG 631, personally, I would say that I have not been involved in this, but I just look at the questionnaire that is provided, just focusing on these two, the 2 tables of wastewater generation and population connected. So if I look at it from the point of view of a operator or a utility or a local body, I would foresee some problems that they might face, and I'm just going to highlight some of them here. Anyway, here is the SDG 6 snapshot for Malaysia, which is a little outdated, maybe 2020, but we have about 88% of wastewater safely treated. Sort of tallies with what I showed earlier in the sheet flow diagram. So what are the possible issues that we could face? Number one, in Malaysia, we don't have this that much, but you would have dispersed numerous organizations which are the custodians of this data. And to get them to understand the data in the right way and in a standardized way, and to provide the data for compilation is going to be a challenge, right? In Malaysia, we don't have it that much because we have a national utility which is handling all of sewerage, not all, most of sewerage in most of Malaysia. And they are able to have very good data management, and it is updated frequently, and they're able to submit that. So I think I don't foresee this, but in many countries, you may not have that. You may have local authorities handling sanitation and sewerage, and the kind of data that they collect would be of different quality, of different accuracy, and maybe the understanding may not be standardized. So that could be one. Second, we have this volume is one of the things that we are measuring here, right? So here the wastewater generation volume, right? So when you talk about volume, the volume generated per capita becomes an issue. And this, of course, varies from place to place. In Malaysia, we have a standard of 225 liters of wastewater generation per capita. Pretty high. Reason is because we have water supply, which is very high and is cheap. So people tend to waste a lot of water. And brings us to the next thing of the gray water versus black water. Many places, many cities do not have gray water collector. By the way, gray water means water that is used for in your bathrooms, in your kitchens, and in your laundries. Whereas black water is what comes directly out of your toilets. So black water is primarily fecal matter, urine, and flush water, and maybe some ablution wash water. So that's a very small quantity compared to gray water. So when a lot of water is supplied to people, the gray water quantum increases. And then if that gray water is being managed together with the black water in the sewerage system, the total volume of wastewater is high because both are combined. But if it's only black water, the volume can be very low. But what does it mean? It means that this gray water is not being managed and possibly discharged into open drainage systems. And that might be reflecting a problem. Third, the treatment levels by percentage reduction. That's the definitions given. It defines the primary, secondary, and so on by percentage reduction of BOD and things like that. So a lot of times we wouldn't know because our treatment plants have some reductions, but you may not know consistently what type of treatment plant will reduce what type of pollutant by how many percent. So people may have difficulty of slotting their treatment into some of these. In any case, if you have many treatment plants like we have in Malaysia, we have a range of different systems and different technologies which are being used. And you may have difficulty of grouping them by percentage reduction. Next, this is very important. There is a design intent of treatment infrastructure versus actual performance. So you can provide a very high-tech sewage treatment plant, which will result in very high percentage reduction of pollutant. But how do you operate it? What is your level of operation efficiency? That may not be known. So even though your infrastructure is designed to treat and remove a very high percentage, in actual fact, it may not be doing that same job because of operational shortcomings, right? So this again is a problem that might be faced when you are trying to report the data in this format. On the part of the sludge production, it is given in terms of volume. And of course, most of us know that the volume of sludge produced depends on the dryness of the sludge. And the treatment plants produce sludge of various dryness, depending on how it is treated. Is it dried in a drying bed, or is it just produced wet? So again, it's not easy to monitor the volume that is produced. It may be an estimate at the best. Right? And the last one is on population. So we also saw here that we have the population connected to wastewater treatment. In Malaysia, like for example, in Malaysia, we have a concept known as a population equivalent. The population equivalent is a measure of how much sewage is generated from a type of premises. So if you have population, if you have a house, there may be 5 or 6 people living in that house, but a standardized population equivalent is 5. So that's averaged across the board. And even when you have a commercial premise, like an office block, for example, there is no one living there, but it has a population equivalent because there is sewage generated from there. There are toilets and people use those toilets and wastewater is generated from there. So we have a population equivalent, which is then decided based on the type of premises. For example, for commercial premises, it could be the area of the office floor area, so total floor area, and you can divide by some factor to get that. With the hospital, again, People might not be living there all the time, but there is an equivalent population and things like that. So industrial and everything. So this may be another concept of I may have difficulty converting my connection from population equivalent to population. So these are some of the possible issues that I feel might arise in data collection. So I'm going to end there, and maybe there are some questions I can elaborate later on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dorai Norayanan, for this very interesting presentation about the success and issue of Malaysia wastewater treatment. So now we have finished all the presentation. Now is the time for question, comments from the audience. We can ask question or comment for clarification from Mr. Rampal, Mr. Dorai Narayanan, but also from Dr. Vivi and Mr. Subekti also. Well, perhaps I can start first, Mr. Narayanan. Mr. Subekti asked you about the issue of sewerless connection, especially for new houses. Can you elaborate, or are there some regulation or enforcement to make sure that new houses are connected to sewerless first before construction? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. That is a challenge that we are also facing. So we have two ways that it's being addressed. One is there is a policy to address all new houses that are built. So anyone building a new house or new building, they must get an approval from the regulator, and that approval is linked to the local body's building approval and planning approval. So there will be a requirement that they must provide some kind of a wastewater management system. It could be a septic tank, or it could be a connection to an existing sewer, or it could be a sewerage system as well. So this is again decided at the planning stage, and it is ensured that this is done before that building is given a certificate of occupation, which means people can occupy that building. This facility must have been provided and tested and checked and so on. So that's for new premises. Now, talking about existing premises is where our bigger challenge lies. So we have many areas where people are using septic tanks. They are okay. Septic tanks are acceptable form of sanitation. But when you have a sewer system that is provided in that area, then the law provides that as long as the sewer is within 30 meters of your premises, you must connect to the sewer. Right? That is the provision in the law. But to enforce that is extremely difficult because it's very unpopular. People don't understand why. They have been using a septic tank and it's functioning well for them. So they don't understand why they have to dig up their house and come and connect into the sewer and so on. And on top of that, they have to pay a contribution for connection. So that makes it even worse because they have to not only do the work, but they have to pay a contribution for connection. So these are challenges that are being faced. And there have been some areas where the government has moved away from its position that private property connections are a private matter. So they have, in some critical areas, they have funded this connection and also waived the connection fee. So that has made possible some connections. But having said that, the level of connection of existing houses to newly laid sewers is very poor in Malaysia. We are facing that problem. But for new ones, we are okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Perhaps I can ask Mr. Rampal. Mr. Rampal, are you still with us, Ram? Yes, in your presentation, you mentioned about 8 towns in Asia and Africa about the data governance citywide inclusive sanitation. Can you give us some idea between like a city in Asia and Africa about the accessibility or the effectiveness of the data sanitation compare are they equally effective? And second one, the indicator that you mentioned for the service function and so on, you have the primary indicator for the about 6 parameters. I count roughly about 50 parameters, indicators, and compare with Dr. Vivi from Indonesia. Dr. Vivi mentioned that for Indonesia, national indicator, there are 289 indicators. For provincial, about 108, and for district level, 26. Your indicator at national level is quite less than. Can you comment, or Dr. Vivi can comment later on? Two questions, please.
Thank you, Professor Changla, for those couple of questions. I think when we are looking at the effectiveness of data across cities in Asia and across cities in Africa, when we started comparing the data, it was very difficult for us to compare the data because the definitions of those terminologies used were very different. I mean, then we started to look at how we can standardize those definitions. And so what we have also gone with respect to understanding what is a safely managed sanitation percentage, as Dr. Dorai also suggested, looking at the shit flow diagram. So we use the definitions of the shit flow diagram to understand, to compare and look at data across different cities. The main challenge that we saw was with respect to coming back to the definitions point. So it is very easy to, when we look at disaggregated data points. So let us look at, rather than looking at definitions, we started looking at the data points that is available from the field. And what I mean, elaborating on that, basically trying to understand whenever a city is doing a household survey or a city is doing any kind of baseline, trying to understand the systems that is there in place, whether it's a septic tank, whether it's a line tank, whether it's a line tank with open bottom, or if it's a septic tank connected to a soak pit. So trying to go as much as disaggregated data points that is possible from the field, which can help us understand. And later on, that data can be utilized by the city for any kind of, they can analyze that data or a subset of that data to report to any program related information request that is there from the national government, or use it for reporting for SDGs and how any other definition is being utilized. Having said that, when we were looking at the data across different cities, in the case of India and in the case of Bangladesh that we have looked at, they are quite mature. The systems are quite established in place. As compared to the systems that is there in Africa. So in Africa also there are systems which is there in place, but then the functions are it's still evolving and it's still mature. It's not that matured as in a comparative sense, and looking at the regulations and looking at the accountability mechanisms which currently exists in India or in Bangladesh. So that is on the looking at the effectiveness when I'm comparing data across different cities. With respect to the indicators, how it is, I think I would need to look into detail about Ms. Vivi's presentation, like the indicators as well. What we have done is try to look at the most, we have done a thorough comparative analysis of different systems that is present in cities or in countries as well, and trying to understand what is the most relevant data which can be used by the city governments. Going back to one of the slides that I mentioned is the city governments need to use the data for them to produce sustainable data of high quality. As long as it is useful for the city governments, they will be producing high quality data which they can use for improving their services or tracking their services. That should be the primary objective. The primary objective should not be compliance to any national level reporting that is there. The moment there is a compliance requirement, the cities will generate data which may be depicting the exact scenario on the ground, or which may not be the exact scenario, and then there will be a lot of issues with respect to data quality. So I think that is how we have approached it. But I think it will be also very interesting to discuss with Ms. Vivi as well with respect to understanding how what kind of data is much more effective and useful at the local level for their planning. Yeah, I'll just pause there. Yeah. I
Thank
hope
you.
I have
Vivi, any comments on the indicators compared with yours and Ron Paul?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity. I just want to add the explanation that when I mentioned about the availability of the data disaggregate at the province and district level, it doesn't mean there is no data there. For the usage of the local planning, they have data, but usually we cannot compare between districts or even between the province. Besides the one that are collected nationally. So that's why when I mentioned it's only 26, it's actually using exactly the same methods, the same sources, duration, as well as the disaggregation of the data. However, if we want to have some study in relate to the wastewater on only for or small portions of area, in some places, there are some data in relate with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe I can ask Mr. Dorai Narayanan. You talk about the success of the domestic wastewater treatment, 88% very good. And then you talk about the on-site, off-site, for the on-site sanitation system, like septic tank. Do people have to pay the fee for treatment as compared to the off-site sewage system, and how much people pay for the off-site sewage connection?
Okay, yeah. So the connection fee is a one-time fee that depends on when the house is built. So it depends on the size of house, the type, and so on. It could be a few thousand Malaysian ringgit. One Malaysian ringgit is about 25 US cents, so it's not that high. In terms of tariff, the monthly tariff for connected services, we have a very subsidized tariff of 8 ringgit per month per house. So that is about less than $2 US per month per house, and that has remained stagnant from 1996 when it was started until today. It has not been revised because the government is very reluctant to review that and increase the tariff. For dislodging, again, there is a tariff, and that tariff is also used to be very lower than the connected tariff. And now that has been increased slightly based on per time of dislodging. So there is that part of it has not been very successful. The connected sewerage systems are very successful in the sense that the treatment plants are operating very well, and they are very well regulated and very strictly monitored, and the effluent quality is more than 90% of the time is complying to the standards. So that's really good. But in terms of scheduled emptying of septic tanks, that has not been so good because people have not cooperated in allowing the utility to do the dislodging. And that the new regulations have just come in this year, mid of this year. And hopefully there is more enforcement, there is more awareness created, and it can be done as well. Because the off-site systems are constituting about 20 to 25% of the total population, it is not a big impact. But in some areas where the on-site systems are prevalent, the pollution that is coming from those areas and also the health impacts could be quite high. So the government is focusing on those. Charges are not very high for by Malaysian standards, because I think it's not a question of affordability, but more about people really understanding why do they need to pay, and what I call as willingness to charge. Not really willingness to pay, but that the government is not willing to charge the actual amount for cost recovery. Thank you.
Yeah, so this one maybe I can ask Mr. Florian Tevanon from Mr. Dorai presentation about the questionnaire for SDG 6.3.1. There may be some issue. So Mr. Tevanon, could you please comment or respond about the issue that Mr. Dorai mentioned?
I mean, yeah, that was interesting point. I mean, that could be discussed to take a lot of time. I mean, what is important is that these definitions are extremely clear. If you point your mouse on the questionnaire, you will see the definition. They are also aligned with, we use also the Eurostat questionnaire for European member and OECD one from OECD country. And we work every month, we have meeting to discuss these alignments. So the definitions are extremely clear. That's the reason why also there is not so many countries maybe reporting. You can see that there is no global estimate. And when people use like the GMP data from WHO, UNICEF or Aquastat data, they are not sources, there are no official data. They are looking at all the literature, including the gray literature. This is not the case here. But as it was mentioned from a presentation from Indonesia, sometimes you have to use estimates, you have to use statistical methodology, but that's from the country side. We don't touch anything. So from there was some issues that I note. Yes, it's true that it should not only focus on the technology, but also on the performance. For the population equivalent, we don't use, for UNHABITAT, we are not looking at the number of population from the table 5, we just look at the volume. But again, for me, what is the most important is that most of the country do not report any data. I just put on the chat box the Malaysian country file that is available online. I don't have the last one that is in process of validation by my UNSD colleague now, but you can see that the amount of wastewater generated is known. So that would be great to have also the volume of wastewater treated. And you looking at municipal plant, it's something that should be feasible. And we had great testimony today from Malaysia and Indonesia, but that would be great to know also from other countries, if some participants are there, and also that they are aware that we use this methodology to work on 631. There are many people here, like the presenter, who are responsible to aggregate, to work on wastewater data. They are very familiar. So it would be great if they could connect with us and with your authority to report some data from your country, so that we know all more. And especially, I mean, UN does not need this data for its own, but from the authority, for the policy, for the governance, from your country, that everyone can know how much water is used. It's so important related to climate change impact, etc., to draw some urban policy, etc. So how much water is used and how much wastewater is treated. So to finalize, I would encourage everyone to look at the links that I sent to see, is my country reporting? Oh, but I know that in my country there are some data, so it would be easy, or maybe there are some issue, but that could be solved, and to encourage every country to report. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vanon. So now is the time for the closing remarks. So maybe ask Director of BORDA, Hendra, to please make closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Professor Chongrak. Thank you very much to all speakers that have shared their ideas and also experiences in dealing with water and wastewater data management. It's been a very interesting discussion. It's been a very lively discussion, and I took the opportunity, I take the opportunity to bring to you 3 points that is I capture from the discussions. I think the first thing that we have to talk about is how to connect authorities to UNHABITAT, in this case, to utilize UNSD questionnaire for SDG 6.3.1. I just following up comment or statement from Mr. Florian Tevnon of UNHABITAT, how to connect the authorities at the local and also at the country level to UNHABITAT to smoothen data collection and also data submission for reporting purposes. The first point that I capture from this discussion is one data policy. So one institution responsible for one specific data. I learned that data sources may vary. So from projects funded data, also government funded data, and also some of data comes from local governments. Local governments, they produce data, and also utilities, wastewater and water utilities have their own data, ministries have their own data. And that requires, that raise questions on the quality of data, the variety of sources. Requires on how to define the quality of data. So I learned that this requires a uniform method for data provisions, as well as strengthening the quality of sanitation sector data. The second one is on the challenges and opportunities that are faced by water and wastewater utilities. From the example of Perfamsi, they have challenges such as low connection and also low revenue. And but there is an opportunity from the growing sewage system market in Indonesia, and also perhaps from other countries. And the next challenge is how to fit this opportunity to introduce the UNSD questionnaires for SDG 631 to the existing system, which is the growing market, and how to introduce or how to connect the existing or develop wastewater and water utilities to use the UNSD questionnaires. I think there may be a need to develop different strategies, for example, in Malaysia, different strategies, for example, for Indonesia, and how to utilize data, in particular UNSD questionnaires 6.3.1. And the last point that I capture also, how to integrate UNSD 6.3.1 indicators to the current initiatives, such as the citywide inclusive sanitation, and perhaps also elaborating the industrial wastewater program, such as sparring program, which is used in Indonesia, into the system with various involvement of stakeholders, various interests, and also various scopes and goal. One slide that I capture is from Mr. Dorai's presentation on the line of sight, where the UNSD, what I picture is that the UNSD questionnaire 631 should align different interests, different goals from different projects, and in particular to collect data for wastewater, domestic and industrial wastewater quantity and quality. Those are the 3 points that I capture for during this discussion, hoping that we'll have a good time and also good discussion. There will be one last webinar, the third webinar for Southeast Asia, which is on the 10th of November. It will be organized on Thursday. So if you have already registered here, then we will send you another link to attend the third webinars, which focus on financing or investment for sanitation. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you next Thursday. Sawadee krap. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.